Hey everyone, Rich Monroe here with BNB Investing Group. Thanks for jumping on this week. We've do these weekly Facebook Lives, as you guys know, with BNB Investing Group. We help new investors navigate the different short-term rental models, whether you're doing acquisitions, the rental arbitrage model, or if you're managing for other investors. And so I'm happy to have a good friend of mine on with us this week, Lucas Piper, to talk about his background and his business that he has based out of Austin, Texas, and kind of his focus on luxury properties. Lucas, thanks so much for jumping on this week.
Yeah, man. Got to see you on a call earlier today, and then we get to do this now. So that's a good day for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to get started with kind of how you got started in short-term rentals. You know, what was your background there?
Yeah, so pretty common story of kind of just getting into it. I wouldn't say accidentally, but you know, kind of with my own property, and really I was just trying to figure out how to afford real estate here in Austin, Texas. Well, having a pretty low salary at the time, you know, I was making about $40,000, and so it's like, okay, well, houses are pretty expensive here, you know, and so people were sharing some strategies on, all right, well, you could have some roommates and kind of do like the house hacking thing. I had just turned 30, so it didn't sound too ideal to me, and so you know, I had my first exposure to STRs was I rented out an apartment I had for South by Southwest down here with a couple mattresses on the floor. And it made like $3,500 in 10 days. And it was like, wow, that was pretty cool. So
Nice.
I did have that in the back of my mind, that week experience of short-term rentals. But anyways, I decided to go against the roommate route and decided to rent my own property on the weekends when I would leave and travel, which is a big part of my life. And so that was my first exposure to the short-term rental industry.
All right, very cool. So I guess much like the founders of Airbnb that started with renting a space on their couch and an air mattress.
100%, yeah.
They had a busy conference in town, so you had a similar firsthand experience with that. So then, so what was the very first property that you did? Was it another property that you owned, or was it another property?
Yeah, so then it was the one that I owned, and doing the weekends and all that stuff and leaving, and then and I can talk more about that for sure. But in the next properties that I did, I kind of went after the arbitrage model. I didn't have any more money. I found at the time a couple furnished properties, so it was super low entry point where I just had to do about 3,000-4,000 in upgrades, and was able to kind of take on a couple rent arbitrage at that time.
So at what point, now obviously you had a full-time gig before you jumped into this full-time. So what was the timing like from like number of units and then transitioning away from what you're doing before into this? How did that look?
Great question, man. Yeah, it was pretty slow for me, you know, and part of that was just because of my mindset and what my goal was. I mean, I had joined a group that was called M1, which is March to a Million. So how can you get your first $1 million? And I wasn't really good at math. And so what I was trying to do was just add an additional $2,000 per month in passive income. And so I picked the least passive thing. And I did create that, you know, extra 2,000 ended up being about 4,500 at that time. So that was kind of my first, I guess that was just kind of like, that was my goal. You know, that's what I hit. And so that's what I was after. So I achieved what I was after, which was surpassing an extra $2,000 in income. And so that was kind of like the first, 2018 is when I bought my house. And then I think I got up to 5 right before COVID. And then, you know, dropped back down to 2 during COVID. And you know, was able to get out of a couple leases. And then it was kind of like during COVID, I really was like exploring that, where I was like, wow, that was kind of scary, you know, like this was not fun. Even with that small amount of properties, financially, it didn't feel real great. And so, you know, there's some scares. I was pretty scared of the industry from that standpoint. And I had, you know, was already surrounded by a fair amount of multifamily and commercial investors from some of the meetups I was doing that were like, hey, man, it's kind of like a risky industry. Do you really want to do this? But what I saw during COVID was something different too, is like you didn't always have to rely on the STR. It was like people were all of a sudden coming to California to stay longer, and I was able to switch a few of them over to kind of some longer MTR stays. And so I was like, okay, well, there is a different route if this COVID thing happens again or something similar where there's a shutdown. So pretty slow, 2021, I started building back up. I think I had 3 or 4. And then essentially I guess it would have been 2021, I was like, all right, am I going to do this thing or not? Like, let's get after this. I was furloughed at my job for about 2 months. So I had a lot of time to think, a lot of time to strategize. And I decided that I was going to leave my job within 6 months then. And so I kind of just went after it. I created 5-star vacation home rentals, and started looking for owners. And I'll stop right after this story. But so how I ended up being able to leave my job was I had those few, I had some really good income coming in. I think it was really cool with my own home because at the time I met a beautiful girl that's not my wife. And so every weekend I'd go stay with her. I'd rent out my place. That was bringing in about $4,500 a month. My mortgage was $1,800. And so not only did I not pay mortgage for 12 months, which was a huge shift, I was also cash flowing about $2,000. I stepped away from being a social worker where I was making, $28,000 a year. And then I was in a marketing making 60. So all of a sudden I had my first year that was over 100,000 just because of that difference of not paying rent, the overage from that, and some of the STRs. For me, that was like, wow, I just tripled my income. Like it was
that's
insane,
awesome.
right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so my goal was if I could get to $8,000 a month, or maybe it was 7,500, I can't remember, that I would feel comfortable leaving my job. So I found an owner that had 5 homes. They offered me a set amount. So they offered me $3,500 per month to manage these 5 properties. I took that deal. Just so y'all know, that was about a 7% management fee. These
Wow.
are luxury properties on the east side, but I don't regret it because it was the thing. I didn't really have the portfolio to show. I had my own properties, but I didn't have anything luxury. And all of a sudden, I had this beautiful portfolio of downtown properties, and I was able to leave my job and start focusing on just the STR stuff. So that's kind of my jump and my leap.
No, very cool. So let's back up a minute on the rental arbitrage stuff that you started. What size properties were those? What part of town were they in? What was the framework behind the rental arbitrage strategy when you started out there?
Yeah, so the first unit I got, which was the most successful one, was again furnished. It was a historic house in downtown San Antonio. It's actually could be commercial. He actually turned it into commercial after I stopped the lease there. And he had it as an STR previously. And so it was furnished. He just didn't do a great job, didn't have professional photos, was underperforming. He was having to deal with all the guests and all the troubles that we deal with in this STR industry, which can be stressful for sure. And so, that was that property. It was a 3-1. I think I signed for like $2,000 a month. And that property for 3 years was grossing about $4,500 to $5,000 a month. And again, my only cost was $4,000 to kind of turn things around, get new photos, freshen things up essentially.
Nice.
It's a pretty good cash on cash. I think it was like a 1,200% cash on cash if you look at it that way.
Yeah, most definitely. Those are great numbers. For those of you guys that are jumping on, please put a comment out there or thumbs up that you can hear us okay. Feel free to throw any questions out there too as we kind of keep diving through this. So that was a 4-bedroom, 3-bedroom house. What was
that? Was a 3-1. Yep. Historic downtown San Antonio. And then I started going after a couple other ones. The one I ended up signing after that was a really interesting property, a little bit nicer of a neighborhood in San Antonio, just about 8-10 minutes outside of downtown. And it was a new build. It was a side-by-side duplex. And so essentially I was like, okay, well, we could have it as like a bigger unit that we could rent together on the weekends, and then during the week we could split up these and then kind of rent them separately. And so that's what we did. I partnered with the owner at the time, investor. We furnished it together. We worked out an agreement on how the arbitrage would work. But essentially that was my third and fourth property with the two sides. So
nice. I mean, a lot of folks, and maybe it's based on the city, but I also, when I scaled in the beginning, started with rental arbitrage, but I kind of focused on kind of 1-bedroom units in the beginning, and then started adding on some 2 beds. So it's pretty, it's obviously a little bit more investment up front on the larger properties, but if you're diving into something that's already furnished, I can see how that definitely helped catapult you into that arena for sure.
Yep.
So then after that, the few following from that, were they also larger properties, or were they?
Yeah. I never had any small units actually until this last year, and I've only managed them. So I've never done an arbitrage with a small unit, which is essentially what most people do in arbitrage. So
right.
I'd say that one in San Antonio was my most successful, but it wasn't. I actually had 2 in Austin. I had one right off South Congress here in Austin, which is our famous street. Furnished that for like $18K or something like that. Signed a lease for 23, and I was bringing in $7,800 a month off that sweet thing. And then the house that we're in right now, with this behind me, this was an arbitrage for me for 2 years. So it was one that it was in our neighborhood, a 4-bedroom place. It was a little bit more. I think I spent $32,000 to furnish this thing. But my lease was $2,300, and for year 1 it averaged $8,500 a month, and then year 2 it went down to $78,000, and then I think it was down to $6,700 when we ended up kind of negotiating to buy the property from them instead. So again, like pretty solid numbers, even though furniture was a high cost on that. I was able to pay that off within about 6 months, which is kind of how I like to structure arbitrage if I'm going to do it. When I look at those numbers, furniture should be paid off in the first 6 months. Yeah. And then try for at least a 2 to 3 year lease is what I kind of target for those. And I don't target arbitrage anymore. A few will fall on my lap once in a while. A couple of my owners have converted into arbitrage because they're kind of sick of the up and down numbers. And it's like I'm okay with putting a little extra money into them to get them up to par, like knowing my numbers pretty well. Yeah. So that's the only way that I'm really going after arbitrage ones now.
Nice. And so, I think, again, for me, I kind of had the same progression from arbitrage. And then it's once you've kind of got your operation built, you're scalable, everything's kind of running smooth. It seems to be a very natural progression to say, okay, well, here's some opportunities for me to go manage some other investors' property and just kind of roll it into the same operation. It's kind of a natural, evolution that way. And so, how many more management properties did you end up taking on after that time, after that first one that you had the 5 properties with?
Yeah, we scaled really quick. I'd say within 6 months we were up to 15. It was hectic. It was bad. It was rough. I didn't have, I wasn't prepared for that. I didn't have a group like this that was really giving me I did. I was in Mike Soldridgen's STR Secrets. I just didn't use it. I should say that. Like I probably had the tools there, but I'm kind of a guy that's a little, want to figure it out myself, make my own mistakes.
Right.
And so, I was just running wild out there, chicken with my head cut off, trying to keep up.
Well, it's tough, and when you're growing like that, it's also tough to say no, right? It's almost like an opportunity comes, you want to just take opportunities and throw them in the pipeline.
I said yes to everything. I was saying yes to, and that in itself is a trap, because there are some properties that were just so much work to get ready, or the owners didn't want to invest anything, or they were just really not great people, really hard to work with. And then I went from being like, I quit my job to create freedom to myself, bird to my old boss. And then all of a sudden I had 15 bosses, and I was like, wow, man, what did I do to myself? And so that's I think we went up to like 18, and then we like hit that point where I had to fire that property of 5. They wouldn't put the management. I think they put it up to 5K, which was still like a 12% management fee or something. And so we had to fire them. Fire a few other ones. We went back down to like 11 or 12, and then really worked on our systems, and I really got clarity on like, what do I want to do here? And because of my portfolio, then I started kind of marketing myself as luxury, even before I had really Lux. And things just started working out that route. And now, where we're at, I've been saying this for a while, so it's actually slowed down, but a few months ago, we were getting about 10 inquiries a month, and we were saying yes to about 1 or 2 of those. So 10 to 20% of the properties that came our way, we'd actually say yes to. And I can talk about a number of reasons why. But currently, I'd say we probably get more like 5 inquiries a month. Usually, again, saying yes to maybe 1 of those. So just kind of slow growth. Our average property grosses above 10K a month. So we're definitely in that luxury realm. And, when I look at it, and the reason that I've gone about that is most of my properties take about the same amount of effort. And so, my property that's creating $35,000 a month is pretty similar to the other 4-bedroom that's bringing in $6,000 a month. So if I can go luxury, that's where I want to be. So.
No, most definitely, and I've kind of started going that direction as well with some of our own properties, and again, it's the same natural progression. Once you kind of kill it with your own, and you can then duplicate the same process for other people, you can kind of easily add on more units that way. But so now that you've kind of doing the luxury, what is your standard starting point management fee now instead of the early days?
Yeah, so we stick with the 20%. We keep fees pretty low. We have what do we charge? $55 per month for tech. So, I mean, we're really low for that. Trash, we do valet trash, so we'll charge them for that now. And then we have a really low onboarding fee of $250. So, probably shot myself in the foot a few times for that. We do have it if that's like our basic entry, and if there's a bunch of work, then now we do charge a fair amount, for startup if we have to do a lot more. But yeah, we're sticking with that 20% fee. The cool thing is when properties are creating that much, 20% is a pretty solid fee for us to get by. Again, when you have a 15 or 20K producing property, and all of a sudden you're bringing in 4K a month off one property that's not yours with zero risk, that's pretty solid in the real estate world. So
most definitely. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the nuances that are involved with luxury. That's different from kind of your standard basic properties. What are some of the additional things operationally that you have to pay attention to make sure that it's successful?
Yeah, so our margins are a lot lower because we're luxury, and the reason I say that is the only way that I've figured out how to do this successfully is to offer like concierge style, which means I essentially every 10 to 15 properties I get, I hire a new local manager that just babies those properties. So again, that's why there's all different routes that you can go in this STR industry. So, guest expectations are definitely high. The hair on the pillow, on our lake properties, they show up and there's some dust on the day beds that are on the docks or whatever, right? I mean, we're having to go there the day of, if it's been sitting for a few times, blow all that stuff off, wipe it off, make sure that all the outdoor furniture is shining, like stuff like that, which is hard to figure out the systems for all that. So it's definitely an extra level to it. But I will say overall, even though we expect that of ourselves and because people are paying so much, I typically find that those guests are actually much more wonderful than our guests that are paying, $100 or $120 per night at a different property where we're struggling, or a lower end one. I don't know. It's just a different socioeconomic class that I can't explain, that respect your property more, understand when things go wrong that you can't control, that the HVAC went out, but that we'll get someone there immediately, and they're not just trying to get money back or kind of abuse the system, which is beautiful, and probably one of the more frustrating parts about the STR industry, I think, for us all. So
yeah, no, I would agree with that. It's definitely, when you get to that caliber of guest, it's a whole different experience, because they're not really trying to pinch pennies. They're not finding excuses to try to get a discount. It's a whole different mindset for sure. So what about the different amenities that come along with luxury, and what's involved on your side to kind of make sure that those things are in place and managed properly?
Yeah, good question, man. So this isn't really amenities, but I want to answer this side first, and I'll go into the amenities. So we don't do a lot of this stuff of like white glove, where it's we can offer masseuse in the house, or offer this or that, or a boat comes with it, or a private chef can come with the house. We just haven't entered into that market much. We haven't found that a lot of guests have interest in it. They're just kind of trying to hang out with their families. And maybe we're still not ultra luxe where properties are making, $100K a month. But so we don't do a lot of that stuff. But in terms of amenities, really, we're just trying to create a fun atmosphere, right? So, in Texas, the pools are by far the best amenity you can ever have. And the cool part is, now I'm not just telling my owners to build, $70,000 and $80,000 pools. I'm doing that myself for my properties as well, to show them this is a proven, strategy.
Yeah.
Now, typically those pools will pay themselves off in 1.5 years. So when you look at an ROI or a cash on cash, it's it makes a lot of sense.
What's the percentage premium you can expect on a swimming pool property versus a non-swimming pool? What's the percentage lift on the nightly rate?
Yeah, it's different, because if it's if it's a smaller property, you're going to have a lower margin typically, I find. But as soon as you're going up, so it's anywhere from 30 to 50%. It's that typical premium that we're finding in pricing, and we have had more. We have had some that have gone up even more than that. So it's pretty beautiful, and that's just the pricing premium, right? And then you're getting occupancy going up, especially in summer, like we were just talking about before the call. June and July, we have people that just live in Austin that'll rent a place for $650 for their family of four, on a Monday, just because it's hot. They want to do something fun with their kids, and all of a sudden, you look at some of those weekdays and you're like, 400, 500, 600, and just from your weekdays, which are pretty dead in most areas, right? But your Monday through Wednesday, you're making an extra, 8,000, and then our weekends are booking for 3,000 to 5,000, and all of a sudden you're bringing in these 20 and 25, $30,000, months, and you're like, wow, this is a $650,000 property, And so when you're bringing in those kind of numbers, it's absolutely amazing. So. And I like to talk about that too, because when everyone thinks luxury, they're thinking man, I can't buy a $1 or $2 or $3 million house. We're not always saying that. We're saying, hey, how can you bring in luxury amenities? So that house specifically that I was referring to in that example, that guy happened to own a $650,000 house and had a fair amount of cash, but he put in the pool, he did an awesome backyard, and then put a movie theater in their garage. And so again, this is so he did put some money into it. I think that rehab was close to $200,000, but last year that property grossed $180,000, and this year it should surpass $2 million. So he's going to get that money back, and again in about 1.52 years, which is a pretty cool investment. So.
So tell us a little bit about the Lux category on Airbnb. How did you get on that? What's involved with it? I know
I don't have
that
any. I don't have any in the
you don't
Lux
have.
category. Yeah. So, and I think it's
Okay.
something they're actually going away from now.
Hmm.
So the Lux they required certain things. You did have to offer some of these services and things like that.
Yeah.
And so we decided not to go forward after researching it a fair amount.
Yeah.
And I think again, they had certain market managers and there's a lot of things that you had to go through, and we decided not to. And so yeah, we're not in that Lux. We get put into a lot of the other categories that aren't one of those. That's like you have to register and all that.
Yeah.
So
Right.
we've
Okay,
been
that
able
makes
to be,
sense.
be successful without being in that Lugs
Yeah.
Airbnb category. So
Sure. Sure. What about the regulatory environment? I know there's been some changes in short-term rental ordinances. How's that impacted your business, and how do you navigate through that?
yeah, we've been really lucky in this part of Texas. Other parts haven't been as lucky, but Austin was one of the more restrictive cities. It had to be your homestead environment, or sorry, your homestead property, which means you were living there full time, and then you could rent out your Airbnb part time. So we were having to do all sorts of weird, or you could call it shady stuff to kind of get through the industry at that point and have multiple Airbnbs. And then as of just about a year ago, they switched everything over to type 1 and type 2. Type 2 is investor friendly. So essentially any property in Austin can get an Airbnb license. And then in San Antonio, there's type 1 as well, which is there's no limit on the amount that of licenses they can give out for that. For type 2, it's 13.5% of the city block. So essentially,
Hmm.
typically 1 to 2 houses on each block can get an STR license. And so, they're really trying to step things up there. I mean, here's the deal. I'm actually not against STR licensing, STR restrictions, especially in the big city. I totally understand that we're in an affordable, housing crisis, that people don't want STRs like all over their downtown area. People want to be able to live there. So I'm for this. What frustrates me is when these laws are in there, but then they're not going after people, because then you end up
Yeah.
paying that 11% plus the state 6%. So you're playing against people that don't have to pay a 17% fee.
Hmm.
Most people are
Hmm.
looking for 17% returns total, right? So, I mean, that in itself just blows it up. And so you're having to
Yeah.
price
Yeah.
yourself accordingly to these other people. And so that's what's really frustrating and hard
Hmm.
within that climate. But yeah, it's been really, really friendly for us. In Dallas, they just switched everything about 6 months ago. They took away all the licenses that people had and said no STRs at
Oh,
all.
wow.
So they're in a pretty serious lawsuit there with the city. So.
So in Austin, what brought on the change to the type 1 and type 2 license structure? Was there a lobbying effort, or how did that come to be?
Yeah, funny enough, it was one family that had a lawsuit for 5 years, and definitely some money got pushed behind that with lobbyists and all that good stuff with that attorney. But essentially, it was a house that's 2 houses down from us on Lake Austin, one of the
Hmm.
ones we manage, that argued that you can't tell someone what to do with your own house.
Hmm.
And that we're in Texas and we believe in homeowner rights, and so they couldn't say that this person that lived there full time can rent it, but this other person can't. And so they defined that and fought that with the Texas Supreme Court, and Texas Supreme Court decided with that homeowner
Hmm.
over the city of Austin. And we thought it'd be this slow rollout, and they'd really fight against it. Within 2 days, they had it up and running that you could apply for these STR2
Wow.
licenses. So they moved fast, and I think they were a little nervous with the ruling, to kind of adhere to that. And here's
Yeah.
the cool thing: is most cities, once they get this revenue, really hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
City council depends on it. The city's bringing in 12, 20, 30 million. an STR and hot fees from Airbnbs. So really hard to just all of a sudden put that for the budget.
Well, Well, I got to tell you, I love that those folks were able to be successful in Austin because it sets a precedent. And so we actually use that in our conversations with local jurisdictions here in Georgia that are thinking about drafting a short-term rental ordinance. We actually look at Austin as a model for that. And so
I love that.
It works out perfectly. And we're still kind of finalizing negotiating with Atlanta, and we've been looking at what San Antonio has done too. So, it only takes one success like that to really be a domino effect across the country. So that's good stuff.
Yeah, it is beautiful. I think it's great. And again, like now they don't have the staff to do any compliance. So that's still the only frustrating part is we still have, 12,000 active STRs in the Austin area. And we have like 2,800 or 3,200 of us that have licenses. So still talking 75% of people that are operating without licenses. So
that's something you just can't. I mean, some local jurisdictions like Chicago actually force you to plug in your license number to go live with Airbnb. And so that's kind of the way to pin it, nip it in the bud.
Yeah, for sure. Man, I know that's where San Antonio is going right now. Is they're pretty close to that agreement and passing something very similar to that.
So I'd love to touch on, I know that you've been successful strategically with your units, doing some direct bookings and some creative things with social media and influencers. Would love to hear a little bit about that strategy and kind of how that got put in place and how that's been going for you.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll be honest. Most of our success through direct bookings is still really like repeat guests. So our email campaigns, MailChimp, having a great experience, staying in touch with them. So that's still where the majority comes from. Or people just being smart enough now to look on Airbnb or vrbo, and we have our company name everywhere and finding us. So that's still where the majority of our direct comes from. But yeah, I mean, we've pushed into the social media campaigns pretty hard in this last like 6 to 9 months, maybe last year. And part of the reason we did that is I'm actually doing a talk here in Austin next week about virtual assistants and just how they've changed my business so much. So when we train our virtual assistants, there's guest communications is kind of always going to be that core piece. But then we always try to find like, what else are you good at? What do you like? What's your goals? Right. And we had one of them that really wanted to get into, social media management. And so we sent her to a couple courses, got some training for her. And essentially she's been running, all of those Instagram, making those Instagram videos and then doing some campaigns for us. So that's been fun and really able to do that with very little effort or time from my part, very little money. Obviously with virtual assistants, in that lower pay scale of $5 to $6 an hour. And that's still something she does within those 40 hours anyways. Right. And so it's just kind of an additional thing. So
very cool.
So that's what we've done. And then, we've done some cool things with some influencers for sure. Influencers get a bad name out there, I think, for sure. When you just say influencer, I think it makes you squirm a little bit. But at the end of the day, people that have large followings and do great content, people love them and they'll listen to them. And so, we have a really cool industry that a lot of people are interested in, whether you're teaching about it or whether it's just your property and staying. And so we've allowed, a couple influencers just to stay at our house, shoot a few shots there. We've actually brought our own video crew and got some really cool videos for that we can cut up as well. And they'll post it out there. And we've had, I think we've done 2 or 3 campaigns. One, brought in 300, 400,000, views on one video. I think we got, 1,000 followers overnight with that one. The other one had about 250,000 views and another, 800 followers. So
Nice.
Something we'll probably continue to do.
Yeah.
It's busy season right now, so we try to do that kind of in
Yeah.
off
When
season where
downtime.
we're not giving
Right.
up a ton of revenue. So we'll probably
Yeah.
kick that back into gear in November or so.
Sure.
So yeah, man, it's been fun. I was actually just talking to a group today that we send them a lot of boat rental since they said they have a bunch of boats on Lake Austin. And so since we have the private slips and everything, a lot of people rent with them. So we're probably going to do a collaboration where, we're able to do, it's actually called, collaborate. You post at the same time. And so we'll have, somebody wake surfing behind the boat, pulling up to the house in the wake surf, walking up in the house, and then do a little quick video in the house, so we can all
Oh,
kind of
that's
post that
awesome.
out together and show like, hey,
Yeah.
you got the whole deal here, right? You can rent the boat, do the wake surfing, and then go up and barbecue and have a nice night in this beautiful luxury home. So
Very cool. Very cool. So I know we're getting close on time here. I want to know what's your kind of focus for the future. What are the next steps? Are you going to continue to grow the management business? I know you've already been working on some recent acquisitions for your owned properties as a part of the portfolio. So what's kind of the vision going forward over the next couple of years for your company?
Yeah, so I've kept it pretty steady for the last year and a half. That essentially what Five Star wants to be is we just want to have the top 50 rentals in Central Texas. So we don't want to get very large. We want to cap that at 50 and almost kind of make it an exclusive, entry, create waiting lists, things like that. So we can just keep dropping off properties that aren't performing well. Or tough owners to work with, and just keep bringing on better properties that we love to manage and that are beautiful. So that's kind of the goal from the management side. And then from the acquisition side, like, didn't have any money previously, so I've been really slow on buying and just didn't dig into the creative financing side of things as much. And so that's kind of been my focus in the last year is, okay, like, how can we buy at least 1 to 2 homes a year, and so that's been really cool of last month seeing, I think we had like 18 or 20,000, come in from just our properties that we own. And it was like, wow, this is great. And that's the beautiful thing in this STR world still is, like, you don't have to have 100 properties. If you have 10 properties that are making 10K a month, you do the math, like that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the target is partnerships. How can I bring my experience and my expertise to other people that may have the finances and be able to find the property for them, furnish the property for them, and manage it and come in with very little money. So I was able to do that, create a partnership with some owners just a couple months ago to get a really cool kind of beautiful hill country view house out here. And so, yeah, that's kind of the goal, man, is have about, anywhere from 10 to 20 of our own properties that are high performing, and then about 50, of the top properties in Central Texas, and sit on that and be able to step out of the business within a year or two as at least of active role, and hand that over to COO or someone, GM that kind of wants to run the day-to-day stuff, give them some revenue share, and be able to kind of focus on something else, even if that's going back to my roots of kind of giving back and getting back into helping folks. So
Nice. So what's one piece of advice that you would give folks that are just starting out in this space, knowing what you know today? What's one important thing they should be aware of or focus on in this model?
yeah, I think you got to get educated now. Like, when we got into this thing 4 or 5 years ago, you could kind of just jump in and make all the mistakes I talked about. That house that I, my first one that I bought, I mean, I went to Goodwill and I furnished that thing for like $8,000, and was still making money. You just can't do it anymore. It has to be really well done, and it has to be pretty high quality and look great. And you really have to understand, like, the Airbnb algorithms and, pricing and all of that stuff. So it's unfortunate from that standpoint that you can't just jump in, with no experience. But I think there's some
Yeah.
beauty in that too, of people just having to do the research, having to learn, at least the basics, if not intermediate, before really making a good decision on how much this is, I guess, what strategy you even want to use, right? Because I think that's the thing too, is like, so if I had one advice, I'll start over, like, really get targeted on what is your goal in the STR industry. Because over and over, like for myself, right, I started to find passive income. Well, if someone should have told me, hey, you're an idiot, it's not passive, right? Like, unless someone else is going to manage your properties, like Airbnbs are the least passive thing out there. And that's the truth, right? Until you build a team, until you can scale and do all those things. So really think about what your goals are. Because if it's just, hey, I just want a vacation home, okay, well, that's really different than saying, like, okay, I want to be a manager and have, this amount coming in every month. So is it acquisitions? Is it like, so I always push people when we're setting goals to figure out, well, what is your vision? What do you want 5 years to look like? And then you can backtrack, and then you can kind of start figuring out what you want your business to look like from there. So
great advice. So Lucas, I really appreciate you taking some time to spend with us today. It's been really good catching up with you. How can folks follow you? Is that your Instagram on your tagline there?
Yeah, man, made it easy for people. So it's right there. See some of the content we're doing, shoot us a message and say hi. And Rich, appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thanks again, Lucas. And thanks everybody for checking us out this week. And like we've been talking about, if you're serious and ready to scale a business and want to see how BNB Investing Group can help you, reach out to me directly. We'll have a quick strategy call and see if it's a good fit for you or not. Until then, we'll see everybody next week. Thanks again, Lucas. I'll see you again next week as well on our weekly calls. So take care, buddy.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.